Dungeons & Dragons horror stories are funny, and a lot of them have to do with bad dungeon masters. But the last time I posted a bad dungeon master story, I saw a bunch of comments of people going, wow, I'm really worried that if I tried to dungeon master, it would end up like this. Which, first of all, no, I don't think it's possible to be as bad as the one that I posted. But second of all, it gave me an idea. What if I actually do something productive and or constructive, and I dispense some wisdom onto the baby dungeon masters of the world? So I asked my channel what questions they had about dungeon mastering, and yeah, now I'm answering them. That's the video. Okay, we're gonna do the video now. Wow, gosh guys, I really don't know how I could explain to you all what exactly I prep for D&D sessions. If only there was some sort of handy visual device that I could use to show you guys the priorities when prepping for Dungeons & Dragons. Oh, wait, that's right, I'm the whiteboard guy. This is the D&D session prep hierarchy of needs. I have tiered this in order of things that you should probably prep when you're getting ready to Dungeon Master. At our bottom tiers, we have things that are like, oh god, I have to run D&D in 2 minutes. What should I write on my single sheet of paper? And in our top tiers, we have things that are going to make you Matt Mercer-esque. I am not Matt Mercer-esque, so I'm just guessing up there, to be honest. At our most panicked 1 minute of D&D session prep, we have a goal for your party. Every D&D session should have some sort of objective for your D&D players to accomplish. Don't just throw them into the middle of a city and go, do stuff. You should come into Dungeons & Dragons night with some idea of what your party is going to accomplish. For example, one of the sessions I ran recently was, Gimbal Pip got possessed by a mold monster, go beat him up. Recording to that, linked in the description, by the way, go watch it. Now, if instead of having 1 minute to prep, you have like, I don't know, 4 to 5 minutes, it's a good idea to get 3 to 5 checkpoints that you expect your party to hit during the session ready. For example, we're going to beat up Gimbal Pip, right? We start by finding out Gimbal Pip has escaped from jail, that's our first checkpoint. Then we go investigate and see where he escapes to, second checkpoint. We go to the wizard college that's harboring Gimbal Pip, that's our third checkpoint. And finally, we beat the crap out of a gnome. That's our fourth checkpoint and our boss fight. Your party can do whatever they want between these checkpoints, but having some sort of general session flow is going to do wonders for you just trying to run a coherent D&D session that has motion and flow and story. Now, you can run a session with 3 to 5 checkpoints and just wing it, and it can work, but if we want to put in a little bit more prep, we're going to come up with a few NPCs and locations that the party are going to meet and encounter. When we're prepping these NPCs and locations, we want to have a physical description of them in mind. So for our NPCs, just a few notable traits about them. For our locations, you know, just visualize wherever your party's going, describe it to them. There's a whole section of this video that's just for descriptions. But at this point in our session prep, these are very loose ideas for our NPCs and locations, and it's just our plot specific stuff, right? I want you to think of, like, in Skyrim, there are certain NPCs that you are not allowed to kill because they're plot important. Prep anyone who would be plot important right here, right? After that, we've got our stat blocks. Either go through the monster manual and bookmark the things that your party's gonna fight, or homebrew your stat blocks, right? I know that this seems important to Dungeons & Dragons, but I feel like having the general flow of your session first and the story the party's going on ready, and then the exact damage that the monster's talons are gonna do can be something you fill in afterwards. You can even fill this in mid-session. When your party's bickering about which tavern they should go to, you can be looking through your monster manual and find a cool dragon for them to fight. After our monster stat blocks, we've got getting 3 to 4 non-plot important NPCs ready per zone that your party might end up in. So for example, if we're going to the palace, our plot important NPC might have been the queen that gives the party their quest. And then our 3 to 4 extra flavor NPCs are like the young prince and the servant that the party talks to on their way in. And I don't know, a couple guards and the dog that they might cast Speak with Animals on. I do recommend you don't prep more than 4 NPCs for any one given location, because the two realities of prepping a million NPCs for a queen's palace is A, your party is going to get super bogged down by talking to every single person in the palace and nothing's going to happen for your session. Or your party's only going to talk to the important people, and then as a dungeon master, you're going to be sad that they didn't talk to interesting NPC number 507. 3 to 4 NPCs per zone feels like a good rough number where everybody gets to talk to someone cool, and then we move on with our story. After that, we have making a flow chart for our session. This is getting up into spending a lot of time prepping for your D&D session. I don't normally have one of these when I'm dungeon mastering, but especially if you're new and you're a little worried about improvising, this can help. A flow chart could look like, I don't know, my party starts in the mausoleum. They're going to get clues that probably lead them to the tavern or to the funeral home. They go to the funeral home, they might find clues that lead them to the Temple of Tyr or back over to the tavern. Having a rough flowchart of the things that you anticipate your party doing can make you feel more secure. It's going to give you more locations to prep, which is a good thing. However, this is starting to borderline on being a little bit railroady, and if you're going to do this, I think you should keep in mind you still need to go with the flow of what your party chooses to do, because it's going to be really stupid. If you expect them to go to the tavern or to the funeral home, and instead your party decides to go try to buy an airship at the air docks, you're off the flowchart, and you probably shouldn't be upset that they're off the flowchart. The flowchart is still there, and they will end up back in that flowchart at some point. Our second from the top tier is going to be visual aids. Pictures of your NPCs, of the locations they're going to, of journals that they're finding. They have like a little thing that they can have and read to the rest of the party. You absolutely don't need these, but they are going to add immersion, right? Also, if you're looking for pictures of locations and monsters and you don't want to use AI, which, proud of you, Magic the Gathering cards are absolutely goated for finding art for things. And then our super top tier of dungeon mastering prep that is like, you have infinite time to work on this, you want to iron out every single thing, is to start scripting dialogues and descriptions and stuff. For example, your party's going into a new town, you might write a few paragraphs out in your notes, word for word of how you want to describe that town as they're entering it. If your party avoids you being able to say that description, that's okay, you gotta flow with it. But having a really locked in description ready to go does add a lot to the immersion of your campaign. It's just something that is not as important as a lot of this other stuff. And then I just thought of this while I was recording. As a side part of the pyramid, having general area stuff prepped is also really helpful. I don't view locale preparation as part of my session stuff, but if in my campaign, my party is going to the city of Elterbron, and I know that they're going to spend a good chunk of the campaign in the city of Elterbron, I'm gonna get a map of the city put together. I'm gonna plot out some of the nobles that live there, some of the taverns that they'll frequent. There's some shops that the party might go to buy things. This isn't part of your session prep, but just having an idea of the locale that they're in is going to be a good thing just to have in the back of your D&D notes, right? Okay, yeah, that's what I would prep. Bye. A reality of dungeon mastering is that you are going to have to improvise things. No matter how much you prepare before running a D&D session, you will not be prepared for the absolutely cataclysmic amount of stupidity that your D&D players are going to exhibit in every single interaction that they go into, and that's okay, and that's part of the beauty of Dungeons & Dragons. But improvising is scary, and going into running D&D, knowing that you're going to have to come up with random nonsense off the cuff constantly, is very intimidating to a lot of new dungeon masters. I wish that I had a magic wand that I could wave, and it would make every single one of you a fantastic improviser who could come up with Tolkien-esque stories on a moment's notice, just on a whim. I don't have that magic wand, and if I did, I would wave it on myself first, because I'm actually not that good at improvising either. I've never done any improv classes, I've never done any theater. I was in jazz band as a kid, and I improvised trumpet solos that were never in the right key, if that counts. No, really, my school band took a trip to New Orleans to get critiqued by like jazz professionals, and the jazz professional looked at me after my solo and said, "You don't know what key you're playing in right now, do you?" And I didn't. He was right. The point is, I can't really help you become a master improviser in one YouTube video, but what if instead of becoming really good at improvising, we cheat? Way to cheat at improvising number 1. Plagiarism. Look, let's set up an imaginary scenario in your head right now. Close your eyes and envision this horror story. You prepared an awesome and engaging quest for your D&D party to go on for the session, but instead, they've decided that they want to go shopping. This is gonna happen to you a lot as a dungeon master, by the way. Now, we have two solutions to this unexpected change of plans. Number one, we fully world build an entire unique store that you've never thought of before, and you just come up with everything off the top of your head instantly. Or number two, we make fantasy Buckies. No, seriously, it is so much easier to improvise little details of something if you're building off of a framework of something that you already know. So pick something that you know in real life and fantasize. No, not fantasize about it. Fantification it. Let's take our fantasy Bucky's store. What is Bucky's known for? They got the weird beaver with the hat on. Awesome. Okay, our storekeeper is a weird beaver humanoid with a little red hat. And Bucky's has those weird barbecue sandwich sections of the convenience store. Cool. There's a barbecue meats section of fantasy Bucky's that sells different monster meats from all around the realms. It is going to be way more manageable for you to just put a few fantasy elements into Bucky's than it is to fully craft an entire unique story just on a whim out of your brain. And some of you right now have fallen victim to the propaganda that you're not allowed to commit plagiarism in Dungeons and Dragons. There are two realities of creating fantasy Buckies. Number one, your party never realizes that they're in fantasy Buckies and you just get away with it, and congrats, you've improvised an entire store. Or option number two, 20 minutes into being in fantasy Buckies, one of your characters looks at you and goes, dude, is the beaver with the red hat the Bucky's mascot? Are we in Bucky's right now? Which is funny. The worst thing that can happen is a little goof. Don't forget that when you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, you're hanging out with your friends and you can have little goofs. Fantasy Buckies is hilarious. Our second way to cheat at improvising is what I call the random nonsense panic button. Let's paint another mental image. You are running a murder mystery D&D session, and you really thought that your party was going to look at the piece of paper that says the murderer is in the king's court, and they would look at each other and go, clearly we must go to the king's court to find the murderer. But instead, your party looked at a little coin they found on the ground, and there was a little bit of salty like brine on it, and they went, this must have been on a ship. The murderer must be at the docks of the city. Now, you didn't prepare anything to happen at the docks. You didn't think that your party was going to go to the docks at all. Improvising an entire district of the city off the dome is going to be really hard. What if we stalled for time? And this is where our random nonsense panic button comes in. My pinnacle of the random nonsense panic button is called Gorbo's Magnificent Boots. Gorbo is an interdimensional goblin shoe salesman that can travel to any D&D campaign across time and space in an attempt to sell his shoes. So instead of improvising an entire dock with tons of sailors and boats and all this environmental stuff, the party sets out to head down towards the docks. The party is approached by Gorbo, and Gorbo says, hey, guys, come on, cool magic items in here. Which, side dungeon master tip, if you say there are cool magic items anywhere, your party will immediately go to that spot. It is like moths to a flame. But Gorbo is a little suspicious because he's an interdimensional goblin shoe salesman and people don't normally immediately trust him. And the party is going to spend 20 to 30 minutes investigating Gorbo's shoes and questioning him and debating with each other if they should buy the cool magic shoes because the shoes are really nice. And I had the whole Gorbo's encounter prepped. I didn't know where I was going to use it, but at some point when I needed a little bit of time, I was just gonna drop Gorbo's in there to buy me that time. And to be really honest, I don't care if my D&D players buy Gorbo's magnificent boots. They're really nice boots. They probably want the boots. But what comes out of a random nonsense encounter like this is the party got to do a cool little bit of investigating and maybe got some magic items. And I bought myself 30 to 45 minutes to Google boat names and come up with a little list of boat names and come up with some sailors and be prepared to run a docks encounter. Or even I bought myself until the end of the session and now I have all week to build my docks encounter and plan how I'm gonna get the party to actually go find the murderer that was in the king's palace. Your random nonsense panic encounters can be something like Gormos. It can be something like the big bad evil guy has a group of assassins hunting your D&D party, and they're gonna get jumped at some point, and you can just have them get jumped when it's convenient and you need to buy some time. It can really be anything, but I would highly advise you sit down between sessions and prep like 2 to 3 random things that could happen to your party, and you incorporate those things when you are feeling overwhelmed by having to improvise. It gives you a little bit of a safety net to go, oh, I don't know how to improvise this thing. Cool. I can just run this pre-planned encounter, and now I've calmed down and I'm ready to, execute whatever nonsense the party is getting up to next. And the last improvisation thing that is like your break glass in case of emergency, worst case scenario. You shouldn't have to do this very often, but I also don't want you to feel panicked about improvising because you have this tool. If your party has done something egregious, if your party has taken an action that requires you to have an immediate improvised response and you just genuinely have no idea what to do and you are shutting down, take a bathroom break. You are not recording Critical Role, okay? You do not have to be a flawless, perfect dungeon master that has an infinite wealth of everything that ever has or could be. You are a person just like your friends playing Dungeons and Dragons, and if things get a little out of hand and you don't know what exactly to do, say, hey guys, I really didn't expect this. Can we take 5 or 10 minutes, go grab some snacks? I need to cook for just a minute just to figure out where we're going next. Honestly, your players are probably gonna think it's funny that they've defeated your plans, and no one's gonna be upset by that. Ask for a 5-10 minute bathroom break, open up your monster manual, find a few monsters that fit whatever bad choice they just made, boom, you're set. There is super duper no shame in just needing to take 5 minutes to set something up, because as much fun as it is to just constantly be flowing playing Dungeons and Dragons, if the concept of improvising is stopping you from dungeon mastering, maybe the knowledge that you can take those little breaks is what's going to make you feel comfortable enough to do it. So hopefully with those tips, you guys feel a little bit more comfortable improvising as you're dungeon mastering. When I asked you all what questions you had about dungeon mastering, a lot of you were very concerned about railroading. People hear the term railroading and they think that it's the big, super evil bad guy of dungeon mastering, and that if you've ever railroaded your players, you should be struck in the head with a 2x4. Is railroading a good thing? No. But is it the worst thing ever? Not really. Here's the deal. Dungeons and Dragons is about creating a story. If you are creating a story and your party is never engaging with that story and you can't make those two things align, that is not going to be a fun game experience for your party or for you. So to some extent, we do have to railroad them just a little bit just to make sure that they're, going on an adventure and not just mugging people in the town square. We're thinking less railroading and more bowling alley with the bumpers up, which seems more like the speed and skill level of a lot of Dungeons and Dragons players. We want to let the party swerve all around the lane and do all sort of stupid stuff, but when it goes too far and they were gonna go into the gutter and completely whack out everything, we give them a little bump back towards the generally acceptable zone. The first thing that's going to help a lot with that is when you are prepping your D&D sessions, I want you to think of checkpoints that your party is going to hit. Things that are plot important and that you make clear to your players they are plot important, okay? Your D&D party is going to kill a dragon. It is made clear to them that there is a sword of dragon slaying that they really probably should have before they go up and try to fight that dragon. Now, you've set a checkpoint. They know that that checkpoint is there. Whatever nonsense they want to get up to in an attempt to get that dragon slaying sword, that is their prerogative. And as dungeon masters, we kind of have to be like a parent watching their kid struggle to put the square block into the circle hole. As the omnipotent god of the world that we have created, we are fully aware that the square block goes in the square hole, but we don't want to take away the player's agency of them trying to make it fit in the circle hole. And honestly, with D&D players, they're probably going to make it work at some point. So you want to set up your checkpoints and give your party goals, and then let them try to attain those goals how they want. That's the compromise between railroading and just tracking them directly to every goal and just having them wander with no motion whatsoever. We have to let them catch a little bit of motion. Another thing that's a big no-no with Dungeon Master railroading is directing your party with out-of-character stuff. Okay, 2 examples. You want your party to go into a tavern to meet somebody who's going to give them a quest, right? You can either A, above table go, hey guys, I need you guys to go into this tavern. I can't tell you why, but I need your characters to go into the tavern. And now your D&D players are like, oh, I guess my character decides to go into this tavern for no particular reason. Or option B, somebody mugs your party, steals their backpack, and sprints into the tavern, and your party is chasing them because they want their crap back. The second option doesn't break immersion, but it does let you kind of shoo your party into the area that they need to be. Or, bonus third option, I know I only said you were getting 2 options, but you get a bonus option right now, look at you. If there was an NPC in the tavern that you needed your party to meet, and they're not going into the tavern, and instead they want to go out and chop down trees in the forest to build a log cabin, holy crap, the NPC that you put in the tavern is actually out in the woods, and he got captured by bandits, and the party end up saving him out in the woods, and they get their quest out there. The entire D&D world exists in your head, but your players are only seeing the parts of it that you are presenting to them. If something outside of their scope of knowledge needs to change so that they can have a fun and engaging story session, just move the plot NPC to wherever they're going. That way you never have to push them in a direction, and the party feels like they made the right choice by going to where the quest started. So don't railroad too heavy, but don't be afraid to nudge people in the right direction every once in a while, because otherwise D&D gets really nonsensy really fast. All right, we're gonna lump these 2 questions into the same part of this video. How do you make your D&D party feel hooked on the story and make them want to dive into it? And then how do you keep them hooked on the story and keep them motivated to continue working towards the conclusion? For motivations to start the story, the thing that you need to be careful about is making your party feel like they are the ones that have to accomplish the task in front of them. I've seen a lot of D&D parties who see this cataclysmic end of the world event happening and they go, oh, well, why are we the ones that have to deal with that? Which, come on guys, above table, it's because you're the ones playing D&D. But in character, it's gonna make it feel more immersive for their role-playing if they have a reason that their characters are the ones going on this quest. A list of examples of that could be, there's a mountain of gold waiting for them at the end of the quest, and they want to be the ones that get it. They are adventuring because of self-preservation, like the Mind Flayer tadpoles in Baldur's Gate 3, where if they don't do the quest, they are going to perish. The main villain is actively targeting and hunting them and is forcing them to be involved in the campaign by not leaving them alone, so they have to go beat him. The BBEG has kidnapped someone that the party cares greatly about, and so they have to go save somebody that they love. Or honestly, just straight up spite. If you make them hate the villain enough, they are going to do everything they can to be the one strangling that villain. The point is, it's gonna make your story feel way more immersive if your party has a reason that they know they have to be the one to solve whatever problem it is that you're presenting them. And then on the flip side, how to keep them constantly engaged in the story and make them excited for everything that's happening next. Hijack the dopamine centers of your players' brains. No, but really give them constant little rewards and feedback every session. What you super duper don't want to do on this one is have a point where your campaign feels stagnant and it feels like your party has been working towards the same goal for 4 or 5 sessions. Right, if you're a player and you have played 3 sessions straight where your party's objective is to go slay this dragon and you have made 0 progress in any of those sessions, it's gonna become very stagnant and it's gonna make it feel like there's not really a point in playing the game. Instead, ideally what we want to do with those sessions is have a little mini goal that is going to happen every single session so they keep progressing towards the big dragon slaying. So session 1 is the dragon attack, and they realize how powerful this dragon is, and they realize that they have to go fight this monster. monster. Session 2 is them discovering this prophecy that is telling them how this dragon can be slain. Session 3 is them going into a crypt and finding the fabled sword of dragon slaying that they're going to take up and stab this guy with. And then Session 4 is your dramatic boss fight. Every single session, you had an objective that your party got to accomplish, and they got the little dopamine rush of going, ooh, yay, we made progress. Ooh, yay, we finished a task. I'm not saying that Dungeons and Dragons is played by neurodivergent people and or that neurodivergent people like their little tasks, but like, there's a correlation there. 2 more tidbits to add on to that. Try to leave the beginning of the next session at the end of each of your previous sessions. With our little Dragon Quest analogy, end of session 1 after the dragon attack, they're going into the next session like, oh my gosh, we have to fight this dragon, how do we do it? Session 2, they learn the prophecy, they go into session 3 going, okay, we know what we have to do, now we have to go get this sword. End of session 3, they have the sword and they're going, okay, we have the sword, now it's time for the boss fight. They have something to anticipate every single session. Obviously, you're not going to be able to set that up 100% of the time, and like, your party might go open a bakery called Borton's Buns, and it's like, okay guys, I don't really know how to make this feel motivating to you at this point because it's Borton's Buns, but as much as you can, you want to give them those little mini objectives and make them feel like there's always that momentum going forwards. Hey guys, I'm gonna show you an illegal dungeon mastering technique. Don't tell the Wizard Council that I'm sharing this information, okay? Balancing Dungeons and Dragons combat is really difficult because you have a party of unique classes and subclasses and magic items and players making bad and good decisions. Sitting down before a D&D session and calculating the exact amount of goblin raiders that's going to be a fun and engaging fight, that's really hard. I can't do that. And the challenge rating system in D&D also can't do that. So here is a forbidden technique that is going to let you make every fight and encounter feel good and challenging. If your party runs up to the 97 health boss fight and they do 84 damage in the first round, you go, oh, yeah, he's looking okay, honestly. And vice versa, if you have a 297 health boss monster that downs 2 out of your 4 players in the first round of combat, you go, oh, yeah, he's looking like he's starting to hurt. Obviously, try to make your encounters balanced because if your players feel like everything is just sort of willy-nilly, it does take away from the D&D experience. But as a new dungeon master, you are going to screw up balancing monsters. I threw an adult dragon at a level 4 party one time in high school. You know what was a bad decision? That. So don't be afraid to adjust stats behind the DM screen to make combat feel engaging to your players. The DM screen is there for a reason. They give you a little hidey spot to hide the dungeon master mischief that you're going to be committing. Anyways, that's my big overall D&D combat balancing tip. Don't tell anyone I told you this. Hey, editing Tater here. I just want to make it clear, don't constantly be rebalancing every single combat your party is ever in. If your party can clearly tell that you're just adjusting the difficulty mid-fight all the time, it does take away from the intensity. All I'm saying with the ability to like add and subtract difficulty is that if you're a new DM and you screw up bad, it is not the end of the world. Actually learning how to balance encounters will come with time. You will just get a better sense for what your specific party can handle. And while you're learning, goofs are chilling. That's all I'm saying. We all have a little goof. That's all I'm trying to say. Just don't overdo it. Okay? Okay. Love you guys. Bye. At the end of the day, when we're playing Dungeons and Dragons, we're playing make-believe with words. So it is important as a dungeon master that your words help people make believe. You want your descriptions to really feel alive, and you want people to be immersed in the world that you're creating. So how do we make good, compelling descriptions? Number one, most important thing, have some idea of your description already in your brain. I have seen dungeon masters that create NPCs and they write out the NPC's backstory, their alignment, their stats, their motives, their identity, everything, and they never actually really write out what the NPC looks like. And then when they go to present that NPC to their players, they don't have anything in the tank to give them. So ideally, a little bit of your prep time is going to go into into, what the heck does this guy look like? That can be having a really clear mental image of this NPC in your mind. Or this can be printing out a picture of somebody that looks like the NPC, and as you're describing, you're looking at an image of this thing. Or this can be just writing out some important points that you want to make sure you hit in your description. For example, if I was planning a description of Jack the Whipper, I'm definitely hitting whatever's going on with his pants, the mustache, how he looks like he benches way more than me, even though I bench more than him, which is weird to me. If for every NPC you have a very rough list of like 4 to 5 important traits you want to hit in the description, that's going to make sure that you give some life to those descriptions. Slight side note also, when you're rough prepping the descriptions of things in your session, crack open a thesaurus, genuinely. I bought a fantasy thesaurus at a game shop like 8 years ago, and it is my most used D&D book, just to give them a little extra sauce, you know? Our number 2 description tip, try to incorporate 3 out of the 5 senses whenever you're describing something. For example, with an NPC, I want you to describe how they look. I also want you to describe the rasp that you hear in their voice that sounds like they've smoked a lot during their life, and how they smell of rich cologne, and it's clear that they have spent a lot of gold on their scent. Or if your party's walking into a mysterious cave, I want you to describe, how it looks, the rock formation, the crystals, stuff like that, but also give them the feeling of the cold air on their skin as they enter this cave, and the taste of the stale air in their mouth, or the dripping of the water from the ceiling. Adding those little bits of extra senses to your descriptions is gonna make them feel so much more immersive, and those little extra details that you throw in there are gonna grab your party and immediately pull them into that description like 10 times more. Number 3, just a good rule of thumb when you're describing something, go largest details to smallest details. This isn't a 100% unbreakable rule, but if I'm describing a person, I'm gonna start with their height, their stature, their outfit, the colors that they're wearing, and then get into the nittier details of like the pommel of their sword, the amulet that's on their chest. You want to make the canvas of this person in your players' brains and then add little details onto that. Instead of describing the amulet and the sword and then being like, oh, it's on this big person, remember those details and put them onto this picture. If there's something that's a huge thing they're gonna notice, but it's a small detail, open with that. But just in general, if you're gonna describe a palace, tell me what color the brick is and the architecture style, and then describe to me the filigree of the metal around the gate and all the little flowers and stuff. And the final thing with descriptions that I try to be aware of is the over-describing things. There is sort of a trade-off in dungeon mastering where the more description you give about something, the more immersive it is, and the more you create it in your party's mind's eye. And also, the longer you are filibustering your D&D session before your party gets to interact with that thing. If I pull a Tolkien and I stand there for 25 minutes describing this cool oak tree, you bet your biscuits the party has a mental image of that oak tree, but also 2 of them are probably asleep and they haven't been able to interact with that oak tree for a half hour. So just be mindful of how long you are taking describing things and don't overdo it. One thing that can help with over-describing, if you still really want to paint that mental image for your players, is to incorporate your descriptions throughout your party's interactions with something. Instead of having your party meet an NPC and giving them the full top to bottom 10-minute description of that NPC, take parts of that description and work it into the party's interaction with that NPC, right? So you give the general physical description of this grizzled old barkeep, and then your party approaches him to talk to him, and you drop in the sound of his raspy, cigarette-fueled voice. And then when somebody leans in to whisper him, you drop in the scent of his rich cologne. And when they get into a bar fight and he draws his sword, and then when there's a bar fight and he draws his sword, that's when you give the description of the cool gemstone that's set in the pommel of his blade. That just lets you break up your description, and it's given your party lots of opportunities to play the game while also giving this super rich description of this barkeep that they're all going to be able to have in their brain, instead of just monologuing for 10 minutes about how cool this guy is. Extra questions that I didn't want to make a full section about, but I do want to answer. Let's do it rapid fire round. How do you make a big bad evil guy compelling? The stakes always seem low. Have the villain hurt someone that your party cares about. Here's the thing with D&D players. They don't actually care about their own characters. If the villain does something mean to the characters themselves, your players aren't going to care. They have no sense of self-preservation. But if you make an NPC that your party loves, and then your villain kidnaps Boblin the Goblin, holy crap, the stakes are through the roof. How to name your NPCs. FantasyNameGenerator.com is the single greatest website that has ever been created, and if I knew who had founded it and they were okay with it, I would give them a little smooch. Seriously, I know that making up names can be kind of a sticking point for people but if you're having a hard time with it, FantasyNameGenerator.com, boom, you got NPC names, you're cooking. Also, side life hack, have a list of like 10 to 20 random names behind your DM screen, and every time your party wants to talk to an NPC that you didn't name, you just go with the next name on your list. That way your party thinks that you always have that NPC prepared because you always have a name ready. How to rebuild a campaign story between player losses to scheduling or style mismatch or something like that. There are 3 ways, I would say, to resolve something like this. Number 1, if it's not super plot important, Season 1 of Critical Role had a player that was a part of it that didn't mesh well with the group, and you know what they did when they made Vox Machina? He's gone. He's not there. Retconned. Thanos snapped out of existence. If a player has like a significant conflict with the rest of the party, like, I don't know, having an affair, Nathan, you can just Thanos snap their character and it's a game. If it's an external conflict, people are going to be understanding and they're just going to let that slide. Solution number 2, if there's like a scheduling conflict and the player has to duck out of the campaign, give their character a really cool, dope death. There's nothing that says that every D&D character has to see the entire adventure through all the way to the end. If your Paladins player texts you and they're like, hey, I really love this campaign, but I have to work Wednesday nights now and we don't have another day that works, get them in for one more session and let them have their dramatic Paladin death where their character sacrifices themselves. And the final option, which I don't really love, is if their character is a super plot important to NPC, you can have a new player take over playing the character. I don't love that because like my D&D characters are my babies and I love them, but with the blessing of the old player, you can like have a little driver swap if you really need to. How do you hook every single person at the table, not just the 2 that are role-playing? This happens kind of a lot with Dungeons & Dragons where you have 2 like experienced players who are playing the game, and then all of your sort of newer players don't really know how to engage with it or don't really know how to jump into the roleplay and like get immersed. Honestly, best way to handle this in-game is have NPCs seek out your quieter players for interactions. If your players go into a shop and the charismatic bard is your confident player who's always talking and he always is negotiating deals, have the shopkeeper come up to the quieter rogue that doesn't roleplay very much and say, hey, I got some really cool armor in the back. Do you want to come check out this cool armor in the back? And pull that player into an encounter that is theirs. As a dungeon master, I think you should be conscious about giving every single player their own moment, and you can have NPCs initiate those moments so you don't have to, out of character, go, hey, you 2, shut up, I'm giving this person a moment. What is a piece of advice I wish I would have gotten when I first started as a dungeon master? Honestly, just remember that you are also there to have fun. I think that new dungeon masters get really caught up in trying to build the story and make sure all their players are having fun and make sure everything's immersive and make sure they're getting their rules right. If something about your sessions is not enjoyable to you, that is just as big of an issue as if it isn't enjoyable to your players. You are also there to play the game. Remember that your own enjoyment is also important. What to do when players don't plan their turns and take a long time deciding what to do in combat. D&D combat can take a while sometimes, and players not paying attention or not having a plan for their turn contributes to that. First step is I like to do an on-deck system where when it's player A's turn, I tell them that it's their turn, and then I look at player B and go, you're up next. And that way you prompt everyone to start thinking about their turn because they know that they're the next one up. Setting expectations for this in like a session 0 or in like a ground rules thing, also very helpful. You say, hey guys, for this campaign, I don't want combat to feel like a burden. Let's just make sure that we're all attentive and let's make sure we all have an idea of what we're doing. If you ask people to do something, They're probably going to do that because people care about what you think. I know, it's surprising. In Min-Maxed, the characters all started with separate quests. How did I and everyone determine what everyone would be doing? I just talked to them before the session. And you, as a DM, absolutely can do this too. I knew everybody that I was going to be playing D&D with. I knew where I wanted the campaign to start. Everybody was going to be breaking into Nestor Albrine's manor. And so I texted everybody individually and I said, hey, what reason might your character have to be breaking into an old guy's house at 2 in the morning? And then I let all of the players come up with their reasons their characters were doing that, and I incorporated all of that back into the session 1. How do you handle homebrew as a new dungeon master? Don't, if you can help it. To be very honest, if it is your first time dungeon mastering everywhere, do not try to homebrew a lot of stuff right off the rip. You can make it work, but just in general, I would advise keeping it simple, boom, clean, done. If you are gonna homebrew stuff, I would homebrew small things. Make a little magic item or make a custom monster stat block. Then later on, you can get into the Matt Mercer-esque homebrewing an entire new class kind of situation. But right off rip, if you're going to do homebrew stuff, keep it small, keep things simple for yourself. You have a lot on your dungeon master plate already. How long should dialogue between NPCs last? Not too long, because any dialogue between NPCs is taking away from the time your players would be playing the game. If I have 2 NPCs talking to each other and it's not like a dramatic reunion moment or something like that, I normally give 1 to 2 lines that each NPC says, and then I summarize the rest of the conversation to the party. I'll say, the guy on the left says, "Abba-dabba-ba," and then the guy on the right says, "Abba-dabba-ba." And then I will say to the party, it seems like NPC A is arguing for this, and NPC B is arguing for this, and they can't come to an agreement. And it lets you be a little bit more succinct and lets your players interact with that faster rather than just narrating out an entire conversation for 10 minutes. How to make battles more unique and varied rather than just saying, I run up to the guy and I hit him with a sword. 2 things for that. Number 1, describe things in more detail than just run up and hit him with a sword. The more description you give, the more immersive it's going to be. There is a trade-off of slowing combat down, but you can find a middle ground of giving some good flavor of what the spells look like and how the swords are swinging and how the impact blows feel, and also not filibustering your own combat encounter. The other thing with that is add environmental hazards or combat solutions outside of hit points. Think like if your party is fighting a lich, they have to find the phylactery and destroy it, right? You can add things like that into other combats, okay? Another great example of that is a chandelier above the big bad evil guy, and that's something that your rogue can jump up onto and swing around on, or they can shoot the rope and the chandelier drops down. The more cool environmental stuff you give people, the less standard, I run up, I roll to attack, I roll damage you're gonna end up having. Should you do character voices for your NPCs? Absolutely. I understand that it makes you a little bit nervous. It makes me nervous too, but it does add to immersion. And the last rapid fire question, when is a good time to use DM magic? Can you give examples of when to break the rules rather than stay with the rules as written? I'm gonna say, for your own monsters, try not to break the rules. It's gonna feel very frustrating to your players if the D&D monsters don't have to abide by the rule system and they're just kind of doing whatever they want. That doesn't seem fair. But like I said earlier, your players are the heroes. If they have something cool that they want to do and that's not necessarily supported by the rules as written, let it slide. The more freedom that you give to your players to do cool stuff, the more creative they're gonna be about the cool stuff that they do, and that's just like a positive feedback loop of creativity. Now, if they're gonna do something really stupid in combat, make them roll for it and make there be consequences if it doesn't work. Like episode 1 of Min-Maxed, Clark tried to disarm somebody who had a sword stuck in him because he was trying to like tear the sword out of their grip with his rib cage. He was punished for that. But let them try it, let them roll for it. As a dungeon master, don't break the rules as written too often, but for your players, let them come up with cool and exciting things to try to do. I hope that you all feel a bit wiser and more confident in the realm of being the dungeon master in Dungeons & Dragons now. And if you don't, I don't know what to tell you. I really tried, okay? If you have more questions, load the comments up with them, and I'll try to go around for a round 2 and get more answered. I don't know. And if this was helpful at all, like, there's a button, you push the button, and it makes me happy, and it gives me a little dopamine rush, because I survive off of the validation of strangers on the internet now. It's a really healthy thing to have my self-worth tied to. But, yeah, anyways, that's about it. That's how to Dungeon Master. Okay, bye.